Hi, and welcome to the show where we share the stories of the many who intersect with our healthcare system but are rarely heard from. My name is Kevin Poe, founder and editor of Kevin MD. Today on the show, we have Mary Wild. She's a pediatrician, and she wrote the Kevin MD article, "Even as a pediatrician, I didn't realize stress started so young." Mary, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Nice to be here.
So we'll get into your article in a little bit, but first off, can you share your story and your journey to where you are today?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. So even as a really young girl, I knew that I wanted to be a pediatrician. So I'm one of those people who kind of just like from the start knew that I wanted to go into medicine. And I ended up going to medical school at the University of Utah, residency at the University of Minnesota. And I worked for about 10 years part-time as a pediatric hospitalist and an urgent care doctor. But I really felt like there was something more. And so I ended up getting some supplemental training in integrative practices, specifically mind-body medicine. So I have training in self-compassion, mindfulness, yoga calm, brief therapy. And one of my mentors at the University of Minnesota was just a guru in pediatric self-hypnosis. And so he sparked my interest in that and figuring out how that can be so powerful in helping kids break habits and overcome chronic pain, deal with anxiety, and things like that. So just recently, my family has moved to southern Utah near Zion National Park, and I've opened a practice called Imagine Pediatrics Behavioral Health and Wellness, where I primarily help kids with ADHD and anxiety using these integrative holistic practices. So it's been just a wonderful opportunity to practice medicine a little bit in my own way. So I don't have to be part of a huge group and be meeting quotas. And so I really take about an hour to an hour and a half with my intakes and really look at the whole person and all the things that come to play in a child's situation. One other thing that's pretty unique about me is one of the reasons I have worked part-time is because I have a rather large family. I have 8 kids, 8 sons. And so I have worked all through this time to really achieve life balance. And sometimes I've done better than others, but it's really been a high priority to me.
Wow. And what are some of the things that you've learned over the course of the last few months when it comes to work-life balance that you could perhaps pass on to some of my listeners?
Well, I think that going with the flow is really important. All of my children suddenly came home because of the pandemic. One was in a college program, across the country. One was in Thailand doing a service mission. They were all scattered and suddenly everyone was home. We all had to work from home and we just cherished it. We actually just really enjoyed the opportunity to be together. And I think one other thing that is really important is, during this pandemic, especially as physicians, we are caregivers. We want to be accessible and we want to do all we can to help the situation, but we also have a primary sphere to operate in. And for me, I really needed to make sure that I was there for my family and my kids. And I think it's important as physicians to give ourselves permission to show up in our primary sphere in addition to our profession.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that. So let's get into your Kevin MD article. Even as a pediatrician, I didn't realize stress started so young. Now, for those who haven't read your article, can you walk my audience through it and share the story of why you decided to write it?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. I think we've all experienced moments where, we've gone through our medical education and suddenly we have this major epiphany that changes how we practice medicine. And so this article really addresses a moment like this for me. I was actually sitting in a documentary broadcast that was happening in my community, and it was the documentary called Resilience, let's see, I have to get the name right, The Biology of Stress and the Science of Hope. And this was created by Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris and others, just talking about how adverse childhood experiences and toxic stress contribute to chronic disease and mental health issues now and later. And this, I sat weeping as I watched this documentary because it suddenly made me realize how much our our health is determined at such a young age
Mm-hmm.
by what we experience. After seeing this documentary, I read the ACEs study, the study on adverse childhood experiences, and I think every clinician should read this, especially pediatricians, but everyone should understand how trauma and stress affects health. It's not something we all are taught in medical school, but it really had a profound effect on me to read this. And since that time, I do, use the ACEs questionnaire, especially when I see evidence that maybe there's a history of trauma that may be coming to play. And I also have gotten involved in the National Pediatric Practice Community that was created by Dr. Burke Harris through her Center for Youth Wellness. And it's a community where physicians can gather to really promote trauma-informed care.
Now, can you comment on how the pandemic is increasing stress in our children today?
Mm-hmm. I think it's a huge thing. While not necessarily our children coming in to have diagnoses made of anxiety, depression, things like this, but I think we can all understand and relate to the fact that the stress levels are higher for all of us. And I think it's more important now than ever to teach these skills of emotional intelligence and resilience. And sometimes we don't know where to start with giving our kids this education. And one thing that I did kind of in response to seeing the need for this education, I created an online course to help kids dealing with anxiety. And this isn't just, kids who are diagnosed with anxiety. This is kids who just experience worry and stress. And so, I think as parents, we can seek for tools to help our kids and ourselves combat this anxiety that we're feeling. Because it's often said that anxiety can't exist where resources exceed risk or perceived risk. So if we can give ourselves and our kids a lot of tools to utilize, then our sense of anxiety naturally goes down.
Sure. Can you give some examples of some tools that we could share with our kids, even as parents, not necessarily pediatricians?
In the course that I've created, it kind of mirrors my philosophy of the types of tools that are evidence-based and very accessible to all people. So I kind of go through mind, body, and spirit strategies. So in terms of mental strategies, these include things like just being aware of cognitive distortions, of the typical thoughts that can get distorted and contribute to anxious feelings and escalate them. It also teaches mindfulness, just being able to sit with our emotions and acknowledge them, receive the messages that they're sending to us, and then they can pass along. But if we try to stuff them away and not acknowledge them, then it can be problematic. Also with this, I teach imagery because our minds are so powerful in creating a narrative. And in terms of how much importance we give certain details and how much we pay attention to things, we can kind of rewrite our experience based on what we're focusing on. So when kids realize that this is possible, it just opens a whole new world. And then in terms of body, now more than ever, we just, even though we're not supposed to be mingling in large groups, we can still get out and move. We can move our bodies, and we need to move our bodies. So exercising, also yoga, I think is a wonderful metaphor physically for what we want emotionally. We want balance, we want endurance, we want stretch. And so I think yoga is so powerful in doing this. There are also different energy medicine techniques like tapping that there's a lot of evidence that tapping can help reduce anxiety. It's where you tap on, these acupressure points while you speak through some of your thoughts and worries and concerns. And it's just one active way that we can process some of our emotions. And then getting into the spirit strategies, that involves really connecting with our purpose and finding where we derive meaning and really maintaining connection with others and doing the things that we love. I know that, right now with the pandemic, we feel limited. We can't do certain things that we have done before, and we have to find new things to do. But if we really survey inwardly, to try to find the things that really make us happy, we can probably find a few things that are still doable, and to really take time to do those things, because it's just nourishing to the soul.
Sure. We're talking with Mary Wild. She's a pediatrician, wrote the Kevin MD article. Even as a pediatrician, I didn't realize stress started so young. Mary, what are some red flags that parents should look out for that their children may be going through unhealthy amounts of stress?
Mm-hmm. I think, in kids, so often stress comes out in behavior. It can come out in somatic complaints like stomach aches and headaches. It also comes out a lot in avoidance. So one major red flag is when kids are just kind of opting out of doing things that they previously would have enjoyed. So these are three things to watch for where stress can kind of be hidden.
All right. And my final question, do you have a take-home message that you want to share with the Kevin MD audience?
Well, I think since this audience is really heavy on the practitioners, I just want to invite all of us to be responsive to our inward experience and to give ourselves permission to take care of people that are in our primary sphere of influence, our families, ourselves. And that's the way that we will have renewable, sustainable energy to serve the public.
Fantastic. Mary, thank you so much for sharing your time and insight. Thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you, Kevin. It was a pleasure.